I know I'm not a historian, so this material, I think, um, yeah, is a bit dense, but it's important because where I'm trying to take it is to explaining the Austrian school specifically because uh, it begins with Karl Menger, who I'll introduce in the next slide, um, and then also where the Austrian school is currently at. So with the historical background, I think it kind of can like um, I help immerse you into some of these ideas, the backgrounds of the people. I don't think you can completely separate someone, a thinker, and their ideas, the person and the ideas. So this is just to touch briefly on a background, an introduction. But yeah,
Questions, sort of just out of curiosity. Spanish scholastics were the scholastics were 14th to 16th century, right?
yes.
Oh, I guess the question is, how did Gutenberg's creation of the printing press, which is like almost mid 15th century, affect the schools of economics or this economic thought and its dispersion or its
Uh, well, I suppose that before the printing press, you had like coinage, and there was constantly coinage debasement by governments. And so I think I'll get to the printing press and yeah, yeah.
I meant printing
Oh,
books.
printing books.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is there like a did it blow up? You know, like did all of a sudden because I hadn't heard of some of these Asian guys, you know, we know Lao
yeah,
Tzu, but uh
Chuang Tzu,
I wonder like were
Tao.
they influenced at all? Like I don't know, did they start
Well, the thing is, like, because of the inability or the inaccessibility to really travel, let alone no internet to communicate. A lot of these ideas were landlocked on the British Isles, um, and then on kind of the continental Europe. Um, so I think there was some dispersion of ideas, but yeah, I'm sure with the printing press there was an increase in the saturation of ideas and literacy and so forth.
thank you.
Yeah.
Why did you say who was it? John Stuart Mill was the most overrated economist, or other economists say that? Why do they make that claim?
I believe they make that claim. Well, I can look through my notes. Um, but I think because he really didn't write too much about economics, and I think a lot of people that do like his work, more like his work on liberty and his kind of more moral philosophy.
So you think he's more of a philosopher than an economist? That's
Yeah,
why people call him an overrated economist because he's more of a philosopher.
yeah, I would say so. Um, but let me get back to you on that because yeah, maybe it's not fair to say he's overrated, um, but without backing it up with the receipts. But
Well, you didn't. You said other economists claim that he's overrated, so you didn't really make that claim that he's overrated. But
yeah, but I would like to make that claim.
yeah.
I think it was because he was utilitarian in that sense that um, yeah. But let me get back to you on that. And please feel free in the next lecture as well to like ask me questions throughout the lecture. If any term or concept you would like me to elaborate on, um, please don't hesitate. But with that, let's break for a couple minutes and then we could start earlier than 3. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, welcome back. So, in the spirit of the Chinese, we're gonna follow the way. And the way leads us to Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian school, the namesake of this institute. Um, in 1871, he published this book, which is Principles of Economics, or we need our Peter, our Austrian Peter, to pronounce. I think it's Grudenstadt, something like that, the German term. Um, but this book, Menger, along with two others, Leon Walras and Stanley Jevons, were part of what was considered the marginalist revolution. And this was simultaneously, they came to the idea that value is not something that's objective, it's derived on the margin. The more units of a stock of a good you have, each individual unit is less valuable. So, for example, I have these 4 markers. Maybe I use one to write a thesis, another one to draw an art piece, another one to break, and the 4th one to throw at a pedestrian. If I lose one, then, like, let's say I lose my first one, I'm not going to forego writing a treatise. I'm going to forego my marginal valued end, which would be like using it to throw at someone. That's more of a crude example, but this is the idea that that value is discovered and derived on the margin, and it's subjective. Value comes from the human mind. It's not something that's innate in the marker. It's what I believe I can use the marker for. This is the idea of utility, and what other people value markers for exchange value. If I can use this marker, maybe not to use to write, but to use to exchange, if someone else accepts this, this becomes a form of exchange. Now we can make trading an alternative good for the marker. And so Menger really developed the ideas on the origins of money, that money did not become invented by governments and states, but that it was derived and evolved on the market. The idea of barter, we barter goods, and then that's what's called direct exchange. Indirect exchange being I use a good not for direct barter and direct consumption, but for indirect exchange. So that's what became money. And we have a whole pillar dedicated to developing the ideas of money. So yeah, Menger was part of the marginalist revolution in 1871, and developed the ideas of marginal utility and subjective value. A student, the most prominent student of Karl Menger, was Johann von Bauer, and he developed under his book Capital and Interest, and some other works as well, the ideas of capital structure. Menger as well developed this idea of production structure, higher order goods being, initial resources that we use to produce lower order goods, which are goods that are consumer goods. There's capital goods, consumer goods being like what we consume, like a ham sandwich, capital goods being like the bread, the ham, things, the resources we need to combine to create the consumer good. So there's stages. There's also time in the production process. And we'll develop this more in our next pillar on methodology. But he critiqued Karl Marx's labor theory of value. He was an Austrian minister of finance. He saved Austria. I believe Mises was also a part of the finance ministry of Austria or something, but these guys saved Austria from like hyperinflation. He was on one of the Austrian banknotes, I believe. Yeah. So Menger, Bauer, these are the first real Austrian economists. originating with Menger, and then von Bauer. And another student of Menger was Friedrich von Weiser. He introduced the term opportunity cost, which is, as we touched on earlier, this idea that you have to act and then you choose. And so what you choose to do, you're giving up something else. You choosing to be in this lecture right now is you giving up perhaps going to sit at the cafe, which may have been the better option. And you could have read and studied these ideas rather than hearing me talk about it. But it's too late now. You're in this lecture. So then we get to Ludwig von Mises. And Mises is considered the dean of the Austrian school. Tomorrow I'm going to touch upon the Mises Institute, but it's almost as good as the Menger Institute. Anyways, Ludwig von Mises, he was the champion of praxeology, the science of human action. I don't have my copy of Human Action, but this is Mises's treatise and what Rothbard considered one of the finest works of the human mind in the 20th century. And it's an 882-page economic treatise. The first 142 pages are dedicated to philosophy. So Mises was like relentlessly logical in his approach to economics. He first developed the idea of theory of money and credit. These are his 4 major works from 1912. He developed this book, Socialism, and a smaller work, an essay called Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, which was the refutation of socialism based on the idea that under socialism, there is no private property, because socialism is the abolition of private property. So with the abolition of private property, you have no prices. And without any prices, you have no way of allocating society's scarce resources. If you go to any store right now, there's goods. What's attached with every good? It's a price. Price is not arbitrary. It's a signal. It's data. It's a way of allocating these resources based on supply and demand. So it's multivariable. But under socialism, just a central committee dictating what prices should be. There's one, the lack of knowledge. All of us have knowledge in society, what we want, what we don't want, what we don't even know what we want, or what we don't even know what we don't want. So you have knowledge, you have property, prices, all these things get thrown out the window under socialism. That's why he said socialism is like groping in the dark. You don't know how to get what you want. And he also said it's the destruction of civilization. So Menger and Mises, these guys were kind of pessimistic. Menger saw the future of Austria before World War I. Mises lived, he fought in World War I for the Austrian Empire. He was an artillery officer. And he lived through World War II. He escaped the Nazis. They took his papers. Actually, his papers were used in post-World War II Germany to reconstruct Germany. But yeah, he never had a paid teaching position. But yeah, he wrote Human Action. He wrote Theory and History. As I mentioned earlier, economics, it requires both theory and history. Theory for the ideas and history in the sense I think of like applying the flesh to the bones. We have one historian who will probably lecture for us in a future pillar, Thaddeus Russell. And he's a historian, but he mentions that like to really win an argument, you need history. So I'm not here to argue, I'm here to lecture, but for future reference. If you can name names and dates, you got a good argument. I think the clicker. But Menger also, just to mention this interesting fact, was a tutor to the Prince Rudolph, Archduke Prince Rudolph or something, who ended up committing suicide. But Menger was a journalist, and basically how he discovered this idea of marginal utility was he was a journalist studying stocks and discovering how the value of stocks were on the margin. So yeah, that's how we came to it. Leon Walras, and we'll mention this, and Stanley Jevons, they were more, came to the marginal utility theory, and then developed like this mathematical approach with this idea. But anyways, Friedrich August von Hayek, who we've mentioned earlier, he was a Nobel laureate in economics in 1974. Mises passed away in 1973. So it's probably claimed what he got the Nobel Prize for was his ideas of the business cycle. This is the idea being that the government prints more money, this creates a boom, and this artificial boom is unsustainable. So then comes the bust, the recession. And Mises and Hayek developed this together. They debated it, but that's what Hayek won the Nobel Prize for the year after Mises died. So people speculate that it was probably to, it should have gone to Mises, but anyways, they gave it to Hayek the year after Mises passed away. He taught at the London School of Economics. Hayek is more or less a controversial economist, specifically within the Austro-libertarian community, primarily because in his work, The Constitution of Liberty, one professor who I'll probably mention tomorrow, Hans-Hermann says that like you could read the Constitution of Liberty as a socialist and agree with like so much of it. So I don't know. I haven't read too much of Hayek. He's quite popular. His works, The Road to Serfdom, but also his work, The Fatal Conceit, which is this idea that central planning has the capability to create a socialist society. And you say, no, that's not possible because of this idea that knowledge is dispersed. Even the most intelligent person is ignorant to 99.999% of knowledge that exists in the world. Everyone knows something that you don't. And a lot of the times, knowledge is tacit information. I can write down formulas, techniques, recipes, but when it comes to things that require tacit knowledge, like how to ride a bike, how to hit a golf ball, these are things that come with practice. So they cannot be replicated via descriptive theory alone. It takes human action. So these are some of the ideas. And then Murray Rothbard, who was another student of Mises and developed, Rothbard was a polymath. I mean, like most Austrian economists, but his work, Man, Economy, and State, was his economic treatise, along with Power and Market. And I could bring a copy of that. I just finished it a few weeks ago. I'm really excited. It's 1,400 pages. Man, Economy, and State is Rothbard's economic treatise, much in line with Mises's Human Action. Power and Market is his basically application of the free market system to all provision of all goods and services. So it's considered the anarchist Bible, because he applies the market to jurisprudence, security, these ideas that people normally thought only the government could provide. But he wrote America's Great Depression after that. Conceived in Liberty is Murray's philosophical work on what he calls natural rights theory, and the ethics of liberty as well. I didn't write here, I suppose. Conceived in Liberty is his 5-volume historical work, along with this Economic Thought Before Adam Smith, Volume 1, and Classical Economics, Volume 2. But there was going to be a 3rd volume, which Rothbard did not get to before he passed, which would have been on the Austrian school from Menger to Mises, I believe. So he wrote on philosophy, economics, history, and a lot of people think that Rothbard, being the heir to Mises, we really will investigate Rothbard, but his philosophical and moral application is what we really distinguish ourselves from like the Mises Institute, and we'll get into that with praxeonomy and stuff. But yes, this is the conclusion of my lecture on the history of the economic thought from the Greeks, the ancient Chinese, Spanish scholastics, French physiocrats, classical economists, to the Austrian economists. And tomorrow I will go into contemporary Austrian economists, and I want to offer you programs that exist, where if you're interested, beyond ours, and existing programs and professors and whatnot, I think I can enlighten you on some of that. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question. That is like, why? It's just like maybe like a personal question. That is like, why do you think like Adam Smith is such like popular author right now in the mainstream economy?
Well, I I think it's multivariable. On one hand, you have Adam Smith, a classical economist coming out of the French Revolution, as well as the development of the Industrial Revolution. France at the time was going bankrupt. They financed America in the Civil War, the American Civil War. They also kind of went bankrupt from the 7 Years' War. And so up until the French Revolution, they were very like destitute. But in Britain, you had the Industrial Revolution, so they were growing in wealth and prosperity. And Adam Smith kind of, I guess, made a new chapter in economics with some of his ideas like the division of labor, specialization in trade, and then with the other classical economists, David Ricardo, and then Karl Marx, and then Alfred Marshall, neoclassical economics, they just trace it to Adam Smith. They just say he's the founder, the father of economics, and yeah, they don't look at the prior economists. I think they're not aware, but also because neoclassical economics is like the mathematical modeling of economics, but you can't model human consciousness. So if you're trying to essentially have more control over society, then you kind of want to make people like penguins. And if they're free actors, then you have to concede that like you can't control people. So I think in essence, Smith is useful because he's not as principled as other economists, I guess, or doesn't have like the same values in the sense that he was Protestant. He wanted this labor theory of value, human history, and Thaddeus may even lecture on this, but like American history was founded on this Puritan idea of the Puritan work ethic and like the anti-sex ethic, and so that's what like a lot of Protestantism, the Puritan work ethic, that's what they favored. That's who came into America originally, were the Puritans. So they weren't like necessarily mostly Catholics. Had they been, maybe we would have a different like culture or economic ideas. But I think because of that, they just credit Adam Smith. Does that kind of answer the question a little bit? Yeah. I know I kind of sped run that, caught you off guard with the little bit early finish on the lecture, but yeah. And then yeah, tomorrow I will elaborate some more from Rothbard, who's deceased. He died in 1995, but some of his students, because really I think that's what I would like to what we would like to offer you guys is explaining that this is really like a family idea, like martial arts. There's a lineage to these ideas. They come from people, and these ideas are still unfolding and evolving. And people like Rothbard and his students have become some of like our teachers in a way, and also through their books, what they really thought about and offered. These ideas are still being developed. We're not complete in fully understanding economics or even political theory. So there's always more to learn. But yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
So this program is called the Menger Institute. So, like Carl Menger is the main economist we're studying, but you also mentioned Mises, Hayek. What exactly was it that Menger did that was such a breakthrough? I know you talked about
Yeah.
marginal utility, subjectivism. Could you also explain that a little bit more?
Definitely. So what we teach here at the Menger Institute is a more human-centric approach to understanding economics, not this mathematical aping the physical sciences of trying to model, but really understand like what is human nature, what is man, what is the foundation, the creation of civilization, as well as the inverse, the destruction, the retrogression of civilization. But with Menger's book, Principle of Economics, this is the book Mises read that said it made an economist out of him. So without Menger, Menger was Mises' teacher. There would be no Mises. There would be no Hayek. Hayek was a socialist. Mises convinced him. So yeah, Menger is the founder. That's why he's the GOAT.
No, it's a question. Not comparing that with very loud.
Lao Tzu? Yeah.
So would he be considered a minarchist?
I suppose so. I don't think he was considered formally an anarchist, but a lot of this sentiment is there. Much like Mises, Mises wasn't an anarchist, but he had the philosophical and obviously the economic understanding of the market society. It wasn't until Rothbard, Mises' student, really developed the ideas of anarchism. So Mises had the foundation, he had the framework for it. Perhaps, had he been around again, reincarnated, I think he would be an anarchist. It was Chuang Tzu, the student of Lao Tzu, that was like considered like one of the first anarchists, maybe the first anarchist, not Lao Tzu. But Lao Tzu probably would have been like if, certain perspectives were just illuminated. But yeah, I don't think Lao Tzu is technically an anarchist. Definitionally. Yeah.
We get to go home already.
Yes, yes. I have a joke that I want to mention because I mentioned it last cohort, but it was it would have been better at the beginning of the lecture. That is if I finish early and I let you guys out early as I'm the last lecture of the day, then maybe you guys would like me better. But if I'm a sadist and I make you guys stay longer and suffer, then I would like me better. Okay, thank you very much.
Where did this sad fall into this?
Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I have one more lecture, and it will be the conclusion of the history. And then Professor Skousen will give 2 lectures on also his perspective on the history of economic thought. And then we'll have lunch and 2 lectures from Professor Dalran in the afternoon. Thank you, guys.